Most students get stuck on one question, and that question quietly determines whether opportunities open or they close. And the question is, tell me about yourself. Whether it's a college essay, scholarship application, or internship interview, how you answer that question can literally change everything. And today we are breaking down a simple framework that helps you tell your story in a way that decision makers actually remember. By the end of this episode, you'll be able to build your own answer to tell me about yourself step by step, and it's going to be done in real time. Joining me on this episode is Harvard-trained educator Nick Fernald. He's a first-gen student himself and prior ESL teacher, which we love, and founder of Revision Learning, a company that works with organizations throughout the United States and is built on one idea: your story told well opens doors. Nick, welcome to the New College Perspective. Super excited to have you on the show today and in our new studio. How are you?
Jerica, I'm doing well. It's great to be here, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of your show.
I want to start with something from your background. So you received a scholarship to Harvard, which is amazing. That's like
Thank you.
Pretty big deal. What would you say was the moment that you tried to highlight within your essay?
I volunteered in an adult ESL class. And so I really saw from that experience just the power that education could have. Students would come, they would give up time that they could spend with their families or that they could be working, and really just the sort of like outcomes as a result, a direct result of those classes. So being able to have improved English skills meant that they got like a job with better job security, or they were able to get a promotion. When I was applying to graduate school down the line, I talked about that one experience of working in that adult ESL class as a freshman in college and how I nurtured that love of teaching and learning to the point where it just made sense that I would be applying to a master's of education program. There was really no other option for me. It was like this, at this point in my career, this is all I can imagine doing.
I just want to pause right there because like what you just did by bringing us into that moment in that ESL classroom is exactly what we're going to be learning with you today in real time. When researching for this episode, you talked a lot about the science behind why stories work, especially for the college admissions process and landing that first internship or job out of college. What is happening in someone's brain when they hear a specific well-told story that makes them say, yes, I want to lean in and learn more? What's the science behind that?
What's happening when you're telling a story is that there are neurons that are firing in your brain, both from the perspective of the storyteller and from the person listening to the story. So when you're telling the story, your brain is actually doing two things. It's giving you the capacity to tell the story, but then you're also thinking about a bunch of other stories that are related to that story. And similarly, when someone's listening to a story, they're connecting to the specific details of that story in a way that resonates with them personally. So maybe when I was telling that story about applying to grad school, you were thinking about your own experience applying to college or to grad school. So maybe it's not the same experience, but there are enough details that you're able to kind of pick out specific parts. And because of the neuroscience of storytelling, you're able to connect and imagine yourself in my shoes. So it's a way to build connection. It's a way to build empathy. And like we were saying with AI, because AI is accessible to everyone and because there's not a whole lot distinguishing it, that makes storytelling even more important. So when someone's reading your application, they're able to say, okay, this is like a real person on the other end. This is how they contributed to their community. And same happens with a career story as well. It allows us to create connections in a way that can lead to really great outcomes.
I love nerding out about stuff like this as AI is flooding this space. Your story is what connects you to like the innate meaning of what it means to be human, right? We've been storytelling since the beginning of time.
Yeah.
And when we give that over to AI, we lose a part of ourselves. And that's why the other side can be like, oh, this doesn't feel authentic at all. I know someone is listening, especially for our first gen non-traditional students, and they're thinking like, okay, Nick, you were talking about the science of storytelling. I'm hearing your story. I don't have a story. Like, I didn't find a cure for some disease. I'm a regular smuggler student. Or maybe I don't want to trauma dump on my essay. Like, I'm wholeheartedly against that. What do you say to the student who believes their story really isn't impressive enough?
Yeah, so I would say that that's something that we experience a lot when we're working with students, that they feel like their story either needs to be, like you were saying, kind of like a trauma dump. They need to have had something really awful happen to them in order to get into Harvard. Or on the reverse, they need to have had something really impressive happen to them. Like maybe they went to a national merit competition, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe they were the first place winner in a robotics competition, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But really the best essays that we see are the ones that are about the things that students often overlook. So one of the best essays that I've ever read was about a student's experience who was a robotics student, but he was like, I don't really want to talk about robotics. It is important to me, but someone can look at my resume and see that I have a background in robotics. I want to talk about something outside of robotics, which is that he's always looking for problems to solve within his house. So he told a really creative story about how he loved making homemade ice cream, but then he encountered an issue where his parents were eating all the delicious ice cream that he was making.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, he created a contraption so that they couldn't access his ice cream.
What?
They talked through yeah. So he just talked through the process of like why he decided to create that contraption,
Yes.
like the sort of like scientific process that went into
Yes.
him deciding how to build. So it was a really, really great creative essay. Now he's a freshman at Cornell. So yeah, really students get to tell all different types of stories, but I think it's important to recognize that you do have a story.
This is so good. This is why I'm excited for what you guys do at Revision Learning, which is help students go through the moments method. And that's the reason why we're here today in this episode. So I don't want to just talk about your framework. I actually want to take your framework and actually apply it to some stories that we can build together. But before we do our first example together, which will be focused on college admissions essays. So if you're listening right now, you're just like, okay, I need to figure out how to write my entrance essay for college. What do I do? We're going to go through that together. Can you talk about what is the moments method and who developed it? And then how does Revision Learning apply it to the various students that you guys work with?
The moments method is a neuroscience-based 5-step process. And that process was created by Carol Barish. She's a Princeton English PhD alum. So the first is finding stories. So we do a lot of work with students, helping them to brainstorm, helping them to think of different categories of stories that they might want to use for their college essays or career stories. And then the next step is choosing one of those specific stories that you really want to go into greater detail in. And the next step is called focus in. So we help students to think about these sort of like general experiences, maybe that everyone has had. So I've talked about going on a field trip to the Museum of Science in 8th grade. And that's like something general where a lot of people have had that same experience, but we help them to focus in on the moment. So I usually talk about a conversation that I had with one of my science teachers where she encouraged me to apply for a summer program that I really do feel like changed the trajectory of sort of like where I ended up in high school, what I ended up focusing on. The next step, third step, is tell it out loud. So helping people to tell their story out loud, just because we notice that when students are sharing their stories out loud, that they tend to include a lot more details that they might forget when they're writing, and it tends to feel a little bit more authentic. The fourth step is map it. So thinking about the beginning, middle, and end. So thinking about just sort of based on your story, how can you configure it in a way that maximizes the impact? And then the last step is focus out. And that's basically where students go back into their writing and they edit bit by bit to really make sure that they're replacing generic language, that they're being as descriptive as possible, etc.
And the last step is getting all of those wins and
Yeah!
acceptances. And,
Oh my God, I forgot.
I mean, like,
We need to make an addition to the moments method.
the
First step,
last
outcome.
you win.
Yeah.
So let's use the moments method with someone who is trying to write their college essay and doesn't know where to begin. Let's focus today on that first paragraph, that intro story, because I know that's like the hardest part, especially, working with tons of first-gen non-traditional students. So I'm going to put that information about Maya, that's the student we have today, on the screen. I'm going to read it out loud. And for those that are listening, if you want to follow along and craft your own story, definitely check out the downloads in the show notes. Okay, so let's meet Maya. She's a first-generation high school senior. She's worked every weekend at her family's restaurant since she was 15. She's done no research internships, no study abroad, no impressive things that she can see. And right now she's staring at a blank college essay document, wondering if she has a story worth telling for the college admissions process that she's about to embark upon. Using the moments method, where does Maya start? What should she do?
Yeah, so first I want to say that even just based on that short description, that I connected to a piece of Maya's story because when I was in high school, I worked at a breakfast restaurant. So would love to, I know Maya's a hypothetical student, but would love
Hey,
to
she
know
can be
more about
real.
her.
We can make Maya real. I'm sure Maya's listening.
Maya, go Maya. I would say that the step that I would focus on is really based on this, trying to figure out what story she wants to tell. So she wants to talk about her experience working at a restaurant. Is there a specific time where she was a leader as she was working, like maybe she covered someone else's shift, or she really helped supervise someone who was maybe a little bit younger than her, or really just anything about her experience working at that restaurant that stood out to her, and then really zeroing in on that. I think too, based on the information that I have about her, she could also talk about maybe like a family member, a relationship that she has had that has been really important to her. So it could be like the weekly going over to her grandfather's house to play checkers, or like a friend that she's had since she was 7 years old that is still her best friend that she can go to for anything. Like really, the outside of her working at the restaurant, there's just so many opportunities for things that she can cover. So yeah, I would say to Maya to really just think within that. And typically when we work with students, we do a lot of brainstorming, helping them to think about different stories that they might want to tell, and then helping them to zero in. So first thinking big picture and then thinking really specific.
Okay. And I know you've graciously you have a free template that they can download for the brainstorming activity
Yeah.
on finding the stories.
Mhm.
Are there any like directions with that that would be helpful as the student is probably downloading it now and working through it for brainstorming? There's
I would say for that, really just thinking very broadly at the beginning about what stories you might want to tell. So if there's any moment of pause where you're thinking like, oh, this story doesn't fit into the graphic organizer, just put it down. Really just, it's meant as like a first step to just kind of brain dump and think about all the different experiences. And then you always have the option of going back and revisiting it and making some adjustments. But yeah, really just putting everything that comes to mind, just put it in the brainstorming document.
Okay, perfect. So she writes down on her brainstorming document the restaurant, the
Mhm.
weekends, the long hours, helping her parents hold it together. Maybe she writes about, you talked about like checkers with a family member. But then this is where the student gets stuck because they have
Mhm.
maybe they're great at brainstorming. I mean, I feel like I'm great. I can brainstorm for hours.
Mhm.
But once they recognize they have this plethora of experience, they don't know which one to pick,
Mhm.
which I know is step two. So, how do you focus in? How do you pick one story over another story? Because stories kind of make or break, I think, like the essay, right?
Yeah. So, what I would say to a student who's struggling to figure out which story they want to tell is within those sort of like broader experiences, test out maybe two to three and write a couple mini stories. So, write, like, say in this example with Maya, that she wants to talk about her experience playing checkers with her grandfather, but she wants to
Mm-hmm.
talk about a specific match where she beat him, or maybe after
Mm-hmm.
they went and got ice cream, something that really stood out about that specific experience, and
Mm-hmm.
then write out a mini draft. Because I think as students are writing, you can really tell whether or not you have enough details to tell the story. And I think sometimes students feel like, oh, I want to tell this story. And then they start writing. And then they're like, well, actually, this happened so long ago that I actually don't remember enough details to make it really stand out. So, yeah. So basically, going from experiences to moments, test out a
Mm-hmm.
couple different options and see which one you could provide the most details for that really does speak to your experience. Because I think that's part of the revision process, is knowing that you're not going to sit down and just write an essay that's going to get you into Harvard. It's
Mm-hmm.
like testing out different mini stories, turning one of
Mm-hmm.
them into a full draft, going back and editing that. It really does take quite a bit of time and effort to get to that polished essay.
Yeah, I really like this. So, like, what does a focused in story need to have? Like, it needs to have enough details. Is there anything else that a focused story and your guys's, framework perspective need to have to be like, okay, let me check this one off?
Yeah, so I think so. We also have another free resource on our website that's a rubric that we use when we're working with students,
Okay.
but it's also available to students for free. And
Mm-hmm.
basically, that is 12 categories, and they're ranked in terms of priority. And so, like, our first one is topic. So, if your
Mm-hmm.
topic doesn't land well, or we think it won't land well with an admissions officer, that's the first thing to edit. And then the 12th category for us is grammar, because we're really focused on the story. And we want to make sure that the students are producing stories that really, land with the admissions reader or with a potential employer. So I would say that would be a good place to go if you're like, oh, I'm not really sure. Go through the rubric, see, does it check these different boxes?
Okay. Yeah, this is really good. Okay, so I'm going to add that to the description down below. So, okay, what story do we want to choose for Maya? Like, which one do we want to go? Do we want to go with checkers? Do we want to go with the restaurant? In this case, which story do we want to go with?
So I think what we really encourage students to do is to choose a story that they feel like really speaks to their experience. So I would ask Maya, like, which story do you feel like really is something that you want a college admissions officer to know? When it comes to your college application, there's obviously other aspects. So maybe trying to highlight a part of your story that doesn't show up anywhere else. So if you have, say, a really good relationship with a teacher, but that teacher is going to be writing you a letter of recommendation, maybe then using the essay as an opportunity to think about another area of your experience that you want to highlight. And I think a question that I get often from students is this a good topic? And really, there's so many topics that work. It's really about the story. So this might sound like a cop-out, but really I would want to see the different stories that she tells. And then I could say, oh, okay, I actually think this one lands better. But from what we've discussed about Maya, it does sound like she has a lot of stories to tell, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah.
And also, the last thing I would say too is when you're applying to college, a lot of schools now have the personal statement and then they have school specific supplemental essays. So for Maya, maybe she chooses for her personal statement to write about her experience in the restaurant, but then she gets to talk about her relationship with her grandfather elsewhere in her application. So basically, you can include those stories elsewhere.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think this is really good. So I have up here Maya's essay opening before and after, and just want your thoughts on it. So, like, let's say before, she says, during my 4 years working at my family's restaurant, I learned a lot about responsibility, hard work, and what it means to be part of the team. And then after, she says, like, the party of 22 arrived at 7:45 on a Saturday. My mom's hands were shaking as she handed me the ticket book. I was 15 and remember thinking, I have to hold this together. So I did. Is that like kind of pulling out the moment in the story that you're talking about with the moments method?
Yeah. So
one versus the other. Do you like that? Like the before and after? Does that look like a good one?
Yeah, no, I think that does sound good. It does seem like Maya's being specific. The only thing that I would say is toward the end, it sounds like she's doing a little bit of telling instead of showing. So she talks about like the growth that she's experienced, the changes she's experienced. And that's something that you don't necessarily need to spell out for an admissions officer. Really, she could just kind of show it by her actions instead of trying to like lead the person who's going to be reviewing it in that direction.
So just showing the responsibility versus saying, now I'm responsible.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's really good because I love that differentiation you just made within that story to get that to work. And I don't know, in the research, you talked a lot about like mental mirroring, giving specific sensory details and all that stuff. Is that also helpful with the moments method in this section?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to mental mirroring, that's the process that we described where someone's connecting to your story and they're imagining themselves in that story. And so the more details that you can include, people are always trying to attach themselves to different parts of your story. So I mentioned like with Maya, if she's talking about her experience working in a restaurant, like maybe someone else has worked in a restaurant or maybe in high school they had a summer job. So just the more sort of like ammunition that you're giving someone when you're writing your college essay, the more they have to connect to. So that's where the specific details come in. It's like helping someone to be able to connect to a certain aspect of your story so that they can see themselves in your story, and then they think about you and your experience more favorably because they're like, oh, Maya talked about this. I remember someone who did this too. Or for myself, I remember this happening to me. So.
Yeah. And I think also it's very interesting when you trauma dump in an essay, it's kind of a hit or miss that the person reading it is actually gonna be able to connect. They might be like, wow, that was really traumatic, but you want actually that connection to happen versus the, oh, wow, that happened to you. So I love that that's what the moments method is doing, because it gives options to our students that are listening. So the next step, step 3, is telling it out loud. Why is telling the story out loud important for you?
Yeah, so we have noticed that when students, and when I say students, I don't just mean high school students, students of all ages. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we're all constantly learning. So when anyone is telling their story out loud, they kind of add details that they might not think of when they're writing their story,
Mm-hmm.
and they tell their story in a way that feels a little bit more genuine, authentic,
Mm-hmm.
a little less scripted. And I actually saw this firsthand. I mentioned that I used to be an ESL teacher. And so
Mm-hmm.
for my students, sometimes they really struggled with writing, especially if they were newer to the country. They didn't have a ton of experience speaking English or writing or reading in English. They might struggle to write a paragraph, but they could tell these really, really vivid
Mm-hmm.
stories to their
Mm-hmm.
friends. And I think it was something about like the connection, the social interaction, the things that
Mm-hmm.
it was harder for them to connect to when they were doing their writing academically. So really that's it. It's just when you tell stories, you add a lot of details that are really, really great and allow that sort of like mental mirroring connection to happen.
Yeah, I want to kind of just delve a little bit into this just a little bit. Who should she tell her story to in your experience? Who shouldn't she tell her story to? Because there's some people that hear the story and just be like, "Oh, I don't think that's gonna work," or, and you might want that feedback, but like, yeah, who should she tell it to as our first gen or non traditional student is listening, and who shouldn't she tell it to?
Yeah. So really there's kind of like two ways that she could tell her story out loud. So the first would be just to kind of like tell it out loud by herself. We actually have on our website a really great tool called Story Builder where
Okay.
you can tell your story out loud and Story Builder will transcribe it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way for you to, yeah, kind of get outside of that just sitting down and writing your story. So it's like one avenue is just kind of like telling it by yourself and then allowing Story Builder or any other transcription tool to just kind of like write it for you. Another way, though, would be to tell the story to a friend or a family member just to kind of get some feedback. And I think, too, it's helpful to ask people for very specific advice when you're telling a story. So, like, if you're telling a story that you want to use for a personal statement, you could simply just ask, like, do you think that this story is worth telling? Do you think that this lands well with the audience? Or was there like a specific part of the story that you connected to?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you ask for open-ended feedback, that can actually be detrimental to the process because if you tell
Mm-hmm.
your story to three people could say widely different things and they're
Mm-hmm.
connecting to different parts of the story. And also like if it's a college essay and you're having someone look at it, an English teacher is going to look for something very different than a college counselor who's going to look for something very different than like a friend or a parent or anyone else. So really, I think it could be helpful when you are telling your story to just, yes, be specific, just to say like, hey, this is where I am, this is what I'm looking for feedback on, just to not get kind of like overwhelmed by the process of too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah, no, I think this is really great advice because a lot of people don't do that. They just say, "What do you think?" And it's like, "No, I'm melting." It's like, this is
Yeah.
not good. It's not helpful for storytelling, guys.
No,
Okay,
no,
so step 4 is map it. So can you talk about how that would apply to Maya using the moments method with map it?
yeah. So when we teach students how to map it, I mentioned that we're helping them to think about the beginning, middle, and end of their story. And we teach them a 3-word sort of like process within the moments method called
Mm-hmm.
magnet, pivot, glow. So when you're writing a good story, you want to have something very early on in the story that pulls the reader in, just because we always say that college admissions officers oftentimes are reading hundreds of essays in a given day. So by the time they get to your essay, you don't want it to be 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. Maybe they haven't had their cup of coffee. They're tired. They're sitting down to read another stack of essays. So really something to pull them into the story. That's the magnet. The pivot is where something changes for you within your story. So for Maya, maybe before, if she's talking about her experience working in a restaurant, maybe she wants to highlight just the actions of a colleague who was really supportive during a difficult time. Like maybe she didn't get enough sleep the night before and her colleague really just stepped it up and did a little bit of extra work and it really helped her out a lot. So she would want to talk about for that pivot, what was the before and the after. So before, maybe she kind of thought that her coworker was a little standoffish or wasn't supportive. And then after, she's like, wow, this person really does care about me. And sort of like what else she learned from that experience. And then the glow is just the last part of your essay where you're trying to leave the person who's reading it wanting to know more about you. So it's okay in a personal statement at 650 words or fewer. You're not going to share your entire life story in that one college essay. I think that's another mistake students make. They think that they're going to be able to tell the admissions officer. That's really leading them wanting to know more.
What things are kind of helpful for students that are trying to do that glow part?
So I think if we're sticking with the story of Maya and
Yeah.
her coworker who was really, really great and helped her out that one time,
Mm-hmm.
maybe at the end she talks about ways that she's applied that to her own life. So maybe she's talked about how
Mm-hmm.
she's been more willing to help her family out around the house when her parents come home late after working all day. She wants to just kind
Mm-hmm.
of like lend that hand and pay it forward. Or maybe she's pulled that into her school community and she's trying to be a
Mm-hmm.
more supportive classmate. Those are ways that you can show both kind of how you change from that experience, but how you're continuing to change
Mm-hmm.
and what's happening for the admissions officer when you're saying how you've applied that learning to your life. They're thinking about you on campus and thinking about you creating this sort of like change within their college community. So maybe
Mm-hmm.
you're a really supportive classmate when you're in a lecture about biology your freshman year, or maybe you decide to found your own club
Mm.
on campus and you really want to make sure everyone feels included and supported within that community. So it's kind of like little ways at the end of your essay where you're showing what you learned and then trying to give the person the impression of like, this is what this person will do once they're a student on our campus.
Yes, yes. This is how they will make it better, how
Mhm.
they will make our student body better.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then the final step is focus out.
Mhm.
So it's like zooming back from the specific moment to show what it reveals about who you are, what you bring to the next step chapter. Is that different than the glow or
Yeah.
like
So
step five? Okay.
yeah. So focus out is more about just going back and editing the whole story. So when someone's sharing their story verbally, or I often have to do writing of my own, and really the first draft, I'm going to be honest, Jerica, even as a writer, the first draft is never good.
Yeah, I mean, me too. It's there. It's awful. But at
Yeah,
first, it's
no,
there. It's like, oh, I have a thought.
but
There it
but
is.
but then once you have it down, you have something to work with. So it's
Yeah.
about going back and being like, oh, actually, this first part isn't really a magnet. Like this isn't really hooking someone. What are ways that I can be a little bit more descriptive?
Mm.
And we talk about different strategies for the magnet too. Like it could be starting with dialogue, starting writing the action, etc.
Mhm.
Uh, so it's really about kind of both like a mindset shift about like I'm not going to sit down and write a perfect story, but then also just kind of like any good writing requires going back and making some changes. And so, yeah, helping people to be able to look for specific things within their story that they can sort of adjust to make it more powerful, take it to that next level.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Maya, it's fictional, but at the same time, it's not. This was really great. So thank you so much for sharing the moments method in just a really structured way. And as Nick said, there's a lot of free resources
Yeah.
that Revision Learning has provided down in the show notes. So grab those, use those so that you don't feel stuck, don't feel
Mhm.
alone, don't feel like, hey, I'm looking at this blank page for my college admissions essay and I don't know what to write. Like, well, they have a way to help you get from A to B. And I know they have coaches as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. But before we go any further, what are the biggest mistakes, let's say top three, students make when writing college essays and trying to tell their story? I know you've sprinkled some throughout, but, looking back on your time with Vision Learning and just all of your experience, what are the biggest mistakes students make when writing college essays?
Yeah. So I mentioned that I think that for a lot of students, I'd say number one is just that they think that there are these kind of like two buckets. It either has to be a super impressive story or it
Mm-hmm.
has to be kind of like this trauma dump of something that happened to them that was really awful. So
Mm-hmm.
that's like the first mistake I see is like just kind of like this mindset of what a college essay can be. And so we really try to push students outside of that like mindset. I would say another one when it comes to college essays is that like that students are going to sit down and write just like a perfect sort of essay. And as we've talked about, like really the editing process of going back and editing is just super super helpful to the process of pulling out those really really great details. And then I would say another one when it comes to college essays is just that that especially now in the AI age that like you don't have to put the time and attention into writing your essays. That either I mean I would hope that no one out there would think this way, but that ChatGPT can just write your essays, or that you can use it to kind of like over edit the essays. I think that college admissions officers, there are still human beings that are looking at your essays. College admissions officers, most of them have seen at this point thousands of essays. And so they're really perceptive to the nuances of the language and sort of like when it looks like someone, like a real human being didn't write the college essay. So really it is ever more important. And what I sometimes say to students is that like until AI has the power to kind of like tap into all of your memories, like until we have like microchip AI, but until that point, really like you are the expert of your own story. And so the specific details that really make your story shine are the things that you experience firsthand. And one of our coaches says this during the workshops, which I love, which is like someone should be able to pick up your essay in a hallway in a high school and know that this essay could only belong to you, Jerica, to you, Nick, just because the details are so specific to you. And that's why we distinguish between like the experiences and the moments. Like many people have had like a mentor who really supported them, or many people have had like a job in high school. But what about your specific job? What about your specific moment allows you to distinguish yourself from everyone else?
Yeah, I number two that you talked about with perfection
Mm,
is something that a lot of students feel like, especially first gen non-traditional, I got to get into college.
yeah.
This is a game changing opportunity and it needs to be perfect. My essay needs to be perfect.
Hmm.
And being myself doesn't feel perfect.
Hmm.
You know, my story, it doesn't feel perfect. So, what do you say to that? Is there something that can be said to that student that's like, I need perfection because I got it. This is my ticket out.
Hmm. Yeah, to that student, I would say that college admissions officers don't expect perfection. And also, I think that if you present an application that feels a little too perfect, I think they are skeptical. I think
Mm-hmm.
that human beings are inherently flawed and we, you know, make mistakes. And so if you're presenting this cookie cutter application, it makes it feel like this person can't be real almost. Like, is this
Mm-hmm.
person AI? Is this person a
Mm-hmm.
robot? Like
Mm-hmm.
the sort of like growth, the learning that you're able to kind of show through your essays really humanizes you and makes someone say like, okay, this is not just like X student who had X GPA, who had
Mm-hmm.
X test scores. It's like, here's a person who really cares about their relationship with their grandfather,
Mm-hmm.
or super hardworking and really puts 100% into everything that they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the things that really kind of stand out. The like imperfect sort of like aspects of being a human that you're able to show through your college essays.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect response. I really do. And we just watched Maya go collectively, right, from a blank page to an essay someone will remember. And
Mhm.
now I want to take time just to flip the context completely because we also have college students listening too. So I'm not
Mhm.
going to forget about you guys. And Nick with revision learning is really delving into this space as well. So students who are done with the college applications, they're now staring down the internship and job season.
Mhm.
Is the skill we just used for Maya the same skill they need to land jobs and internships? What can you say about how the moments method applies to those specific cases?
Yeah, so I would say that I mentioned earlier in our conversation that so much of the job application process now is automated by AI, or
Mm-hmm.
AI is a essential part of the process, both from the
Mm-hmm.
perspective of the people applying as well as the employer. So like people applying are using AI to make sure that their resumes are really perfect, and then also sometimes helping them edit their cover letters.
Mm-hmm.
Employers use AI to sift through the hiring materials. Your story is really where you stand out. So when you are meeting someone at a networking event and you're sharing a little bit about your experience, and then also when you're interviewing, I would say an interview is like a really great place where the moments method shows up. So we teach students within the moments method another process specifically for careers called SAO, situation action outcome. It's a super easy acronym that students can use when someone says, okay, now tell me about a time where you collaborated on a project that you were really proud of. So you don't want to
Mm-hmm.
just give like a general answer where you're saying like, oh yeah, like my colleagues and I really worked well together.
Mm-hmm.
We always collaborated on a lot of projects. Like you really want to zero in on one specific project.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do? What did your teammates do? Was there like a specific action that you took that really helped bring that project to the finish line?
Mm-hmm.
And then what was the outcome? So was the outcome that you presented it in front of your boss and your boss was really happy? Was it that you all got to collaborate on another project?
Mm-hmm.
So really, within the Moments method, we teach people how to talk about specific experiences that they've had to help them, mostly I would say in interviews and sort of like networking. But really, like I would say people underestimate how much storytelling, or just like both like the storytelling that happens talking about your own experience, but just
Mm-hmm.
connecting to other people's experience makes a
Mm-hmm.
difference. Like if you send an email where you say, "Hey Jerica, I noticed you started your own company. I'm thinking about starting my own company."
Mm-hmm.
I would imagine you'd be much more likely to respond to that versus someone that's like, "Hey Jerica, I think what you're building is really cool." Like it's like
Mm-hmm.
the sort of like distinguishing of like, "Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
actually am already connecting to your story and I'm like really impressed by what
Yes.
you're building and I want to have a call." So you can do that on email, on LinkedIn, just like finding ways to connect to someone else's experience. I do that all the time. I'm big on LinkedIn. So I do that all
Yeah,
the time
yeah.
where
I
I'm
mean,
like,
that's how we got a connection too. Like LinkedIn
yeah,
is where it's at, guys. I'm
we're
telling you.
yeah. People underestimate the power of LinkedIn, but
Ooh,
I
they
think
do.
there's something about I really think that that's like an example of like why storytelling is so important. It's like people
Mm-hmm.
connect to specifics. I can't tell
Mm-hmm.
you how many emails I get daily, as I'm sure you do too.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like when someone sends me a LinkedIn message, at the very minimum, I'm going to go to their profile. I see their hopefully their smiling headshot.
Mm-hmm.
I get
Yeah.
to learn a little bit about like where they went to school, if they went
Mm-hmm.
to school, what jobs they have, if they have like a filled in
Mm.
about section. I get to learn about their background. And it just, yeah, it's like that human connection is really
Hmm.
there and it makes people much more inclined, I think, to want to respond.
Yeah, you're looking for that story,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is like that's why I'm so glad to like to have you, on the show on the New College Perspective because this conversation is opening up our students' eyes to the importance of weaving in the
Hmm.
story as they go about their
Yeah.
life so that they can get that next opportunity and that next story is actually open for them because the person listening is like, I resonate with that story
Hmm.
and I want to welcome them in, whether that's to a coffee chat or to giving them a job opportunity. So for this one, for the sake of time and everything, we're going to walk through meeting John, who is a junior studying communications. He's worked at Target every weekend since his freshman year to help cover tuition. He's never had an internship, and he has a career fair on campus next week. And his school's career center told him, just be confident. You know how many times I've heard that? Just be confident. He has no idea what that means.
Hmm.
So when someone says, tell me about yourself, at the career fair, he plans to just list his major, his GPA, and then I guess go quiet. So I would love to get your thoughts on just walk us through the whole moments method. How would you advise John to be able to get his story out during this upcoming career fair?
Yeah. So I would say for John, I would come with a couple stories prepared. So for that question of tell me about yourself, it can be good to have like a really central story related to your experience. So for myself, depending on the context that I'm in, I kind of adapt that question or the my response to that question depending on the audience. So
Mm-hmm.
like for a person who asks me like why did I or how did I end up being the founder of a company, I usually tell the story of freshman year, like I said earlier, freshman year, really
Mm-hmm.
going into college thinking that I wanted to study business and then doing this
Mm-hmm.
program where I got to see the connection between the classroom work that I was doing and the community that I was serving. And really, it reframed how I wanted to make an impact on the world. And then, yeah, I had the opportunity to kind of come full circle and start my own business and basically make an impact on a larger audience. So that could be like the central story of why I ended up starting Revision Learning. So
Mm-hmm.
thinking about like if you're going to a job fair and you're looking for a specific type of role, how can you kind of reframe that story depending? And I feel like if you are a student who maybe you said a junior in college or high
Mm-hmm.
school, junior in
Yeah,
college.
college. Yeah, we're going to
Yeah.
the college side. So
Okay.
he's going to
Right.
a
Right.
career fair, and he's like, "Yeah, I have to answer the question. Tell me about yourself
Yeah.
to these people here. What do I say?"
Yeah. So I'd say maybe John's major is finance. And so maybe
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I've always been, he talks about being obsessed with numbers from a really young age. and really just finding ways to pursue that passion, like taking AP Calculus in high school and then applying to the business school at his university, just kind of showing, because I think too, when you're in college, you might think that you don't have any experiences that are worthwhile. Like maybe John hasn't had an opportunity to do an internship, or maybe he has had an
Yeah, which
opportunity
he
to do an
hasn't.
internship. Yeah, no internship. Okay. So that's kind of like what I would say to John, is like trying to thread the needle and show all the different things that have connected. And if there is like a specific thing that you can highlight that shows when you decided you wanted to study X major, or when you decided that you wanted to apply for X job, that can be really, really helpful for people to understand. So for students, just trying to find that story that you can tell, and people will remember it. Like if you just say, like, I love finance because I love numbers, like that, thousands of people could say that. But if you're like, I love finance because I had a math teacher in the eighth grade who made me realize that I was a math person. Before that, I thought that I wasn't a math person. Like I studied history in college, and I usually credit my studying history in college to a teacher that I had when I was in high school, where she just taught history in a different way that was super compelling. It was like very hands-on, a lot of reflecting about the history that we were learning about. So yeah, so if you can kind of show that for your audience, I think it'll stand out and they'll remember you. And they can say, oh, this is John, not just John who I met at the career fair at UMass Amherst, which is where I went for undergrad, but this is John, and he is the one who had that really, really great eighth grade math teacher who made him want to pursue finance as an adult.
Yeah, and that glow part comes out because you want to be like, well, tell me more. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
why? Like, you're like, well, yeah, I really want to know more.
yeah.
So I liked how what you were telling for John is like, okay, figure out using the moments method, like when you decided to go into X major, and most likely like connecting that with the employer that you're talking to. How long should these stories be? Is it like, okay, here's my coffee. Let me sit down and tell you my story. In
Yeah.
these career situations, these internships, these career fairs, these interviews, what's your advice on that?
Yeah, I would say in an interview, you do typically have a couple minutes to respond to that question. You don't want to go on for 5, 10 minutes, but really, like I would say, a solid 3 to 4 minutes answering that question, I think is fine. And especially too, if you're telling it in a moments method centric way where you're including a lot of really great details, you have that like pinpointed story that you want to highlight. I think someone will be kind of on the edge of their seat listening to your story, that they'll be so captivated. But I would say when it comes to networking events, you can kind of sense it out. Like if you're at a networking event, or like at the career fair, maybe you want to come up with like your elevator pitch, which is usually like 30 seconds to a minute, and you're just like, I've been in love with math ever since eighth grade when I had a really great math teacher, and then I found different ways to cultivate it up until this point, and I really want to work at your company for X, like kind of like threading that needle, like I said, but in a much more concise way.
Yeah, I like this. Like basically, you don't want to be general.
Yeah.
You want to make sure that you're leaving them with something they can hold on to. So even when you do reach out to them, let's say on LinkedIn or something, you can be like, I'm the guy that, and they're like, oh yeah, I remember that was
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
I met during this specific event. So you talked a little bit earlier about the acronym SAO. How would that apply to the situation we've been discussing with John getting prepared for his career fair and not knowing what to say?
Yeah, so I think for John, if he were to prepare for a career fair, I think SEO could help him more so with specific stories. Like if someone says, sort of like, what was the impetus for you wanting, or like, why do you want to work for our company? Like maybe he can specifically highlight a story that exemplify, like maybe a friend told him about the company, or like maybe he knows someone who worked at that company, and he can highlight like, yeah, I had a conversation with X who was in X role, and he told me about just the great opportunities that were available to him as a result of this internship, trying to be as specific as possible. But it's more, I would say the SAO, situation action outcome framework, is more helpful when you're being asked questions during an interview. Sometimes they do come up during a networking event, but more so where it's like, tell me about a time where you, like I said, were a leader at your company, or tell me about a time where you got to work on a project that really lit you up and got you excited about the work that you were doing. Um, and you can still incorporate that into your like general career story, answering the question about tell me about yourself. But with that, it's more so about highlighting like a specific story and kind of having that be central to connecting the dots across different experiences that you've had.
So as we start to land the plane, I want to ask one more question about AI, and because I feel like you have lots of thoughts on AI. Students are using tools like ChatGPT to write college essays, scholarship essays, and even internship applications. In your experience, what works? Because we talked a lot about like what doesn't work and what completely backfires when students rely on AI to tell their story.
I think AI is a really, really great tool. And I think that if you use it in an ethical way, I think it can really help you when it comes to college admissions and careers. So for college admissions, ways that we encourage students to use AI would be, sometimes schools will ask specific questions that are a little bit unclear, or they might be asking one thing, but they're really asking multiple things. So like an example would be if a school asks why this major, they're not just asking you to talk about why you want to study computer science, but why do you want to study computer science at Harvard, Princeton, UMass Amherst, et cetera. So when you ask AI or you prompt AI, you're like, hey, what is this question asking? Or can you break down the language of this prompt? That can be really helpful. Or when it comes to college essays, if you're looking for examples of college essays, AI can point you in the right direction. And then with careers too, I think it can be helpful if you're applying for a job and you want to say like, what are 10 common questions that might get asked for someone applying for an entry-level computer science position. But then the work comes in where you're thinking about, for both your college essays and your career, where can you be really, really specific? So like I said, right now, who knows what will happen in the future, but right now there's no AI microchip that can tap into all of our memories. It's really the uniqueness of what you bring to the table when it comes to your college admissions essays and your career stories is like, what is the uniqueness of your own lived experience? So basically, yeah, I'd say AI is like the good sort of like prompter, helping you break down the language of the prompt, but the stories should really be your own. And I would say even you could use AI if you wanted to kind of like help you edit some of your stories, like provide like light edits, but at the point at which AI is writing any of your story, that's kind of like the line in the sand for us. Like the story should be 100% your own.
Yeah, yeah. You're saying a little bit of controversial things out there, Nick, right now. So if someone is listening right now and they actually followed along and are no longer staring at a blank page, first of all, kudos to you for getting to the point where you have something on the page and they're ready to go further with revision learning. They're like, you know what, Nick's method, this method is amazing. What they're doing is amazing. I want additional help writing out my college admission story or the story to stand out in the internship job interview, help with the SAO method. What's the next step? What does the revision learning offer? Someone's ready to go. Where do they go?
So I would say when it comes to how revision learning can support you, there are a ton of free resources that we offer both for college students and for people who are within their career already or are in the early stages of starting their career. So if you go to our website, in the top bar and you click resources, there are a ton of free resources and they're divided up based on if you're applying to college or careers. And actually a lot of our resources, because we're teaching storytelling as a skill, a lot of our resources kind of overlap. So like the 4x4 brainstorming worksheet, you could use that when you're applying to college, or you could use that when you're trying to figure out what career stories you might want to tell. And then the other place that I would go on our website is if you go to the top right, you'll see a login button. And that's where I said you could create a free account. We have a platform where basically you can access some free self-paced courses. There's different story prompts. And then there's also our story builder tool, which guides you through the 5 steps of the moments method and helps you to create a story. So those are all free. We really try to emphasize the free for students because I mentioned that I'm a first gen student. When I was writing my college essays, I was like, I don't even know where to start. Like, what's a college essay? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. So we really try to emphasize the free. If you're looking for some additional support, we do offer workshops. We also offer one-on-one coaching where you can work with one of our coaches to help with your college essays or your career stories. And then we also, if you are like a leader and you want to, lead a workshop with your colleagues, or if you're a high school teacher and you want to lead a workshop with your students, we also do have curriculum materials so you can implement our framework within your classroom. So yeah, really try to emphasize the free, but if you are interested in looking for some additional support, we do have some paid services as well.
Yeah, no, and we have first gen non-traditional students listening to us, but we also have a wide range of people working in universities and organizations and things like that. And so Nick in Reversion Learning they're doing amazing work and would really just slide right into what you guys are already doing with your scholarship students and everything, how to help them be successful at articulating their story, because that's how you stand out, especially as we get more and more AI-ness into our lives. So, Nick, this has been an amazing session. I would dare call it like a masterclass in storytelling, essays, all of this stuff. Where can our listeners find you? Tell us your website one more time, all your social media handles, and yeah, where can they find you?
Yeah, so if you want to find out more about the work that we're doing at Revision Learning, you can just go to learn, Learn, revision, revision.com. And then if you want to create a free account, like I said in the top right-hand corner, you can click login and that'll bring you to storybuilder.learnrevision.com. So that's where you can create an account. And then right now, I'm only on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn just by going to linkedin.com/Nick-Fernald. And then we also have a company page. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to our team at hello@learnrevision.com or send me an email. I love getting emails. I love getting to connect with people from different backgrounds, even if it's just, I have a question about a college essay or about what this could look like for our students. Shoot me an email, and my email is just nick@learnrevision.com.
Thank you so much, Nick. And for our audience, if you're listening right now and you've ever thought my story isn't impressive enough, this episode was made with love for you, because your story already has moments that matter and you just needed a way to find them and to be able to share them. So Nick, I want to thank you so much for helping our students see that today. And I don't know, I kind of want to leave with our students hearing that your story does matter and you are unique. And it's enough. Your story is enough to get into these opportunities, to land those interviews, to do well in those internships. And so with that, I will see everybody else on the next episode of The New College Perspective. Thank you, Nick, so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Jerica. This was so much fun.